Welcome to the program this morning. My name is JJ Barrett, and this is Mountaineer Farm Talk. Also, we have with us Evan Wilson and Brandy Brabham, who was just getting on. Today, we have a special guest with us, Dr. Jett. He is our Extension Horticulture Specialist. How are you doing today, Lewis?
I'm great, JJ. Good to see you. Glad to be here.
Good, good. Are you interested in livestock nutrition, animal health, forages, pasture improvement, farm management, crop production, country and western music, rural health issues, gardening, or any topic related to agriculture and farming? Then join us every Friday at 10 o'clock for the Mountaineer Farm Talk. We will learn, share, laugh, and enjoy a cup of cowboy coffee or herbal tea for non-coffee drinkers. We encourage audience participation, so have your questions ready. And a reminder, next week, Dr. Carlos Quesada, our entomology specialist, will be talking about spring pests in the garden. However, this week, we have Jett with us, the one and only. He is our horticulture specialist and a wealth of knowledge for both commercial and home gardening enthusiasts. So, Lewis, we hear that you are the guru of heirloom vegetables. Is this true?
I don't know about that. There's a lot of other more seasoned heirloom specialists than I am around the state, and of course in Appalachia. I just sort of, I don't know, JJ. When I came out of grad school with my horticulture degree, I was all with hybrids. I mean, everything had to be a hybrid variety before I even recommended it. I'm from West Virginia, and we farm here in the state. But I got to tell you, coming back to West Virginia made you think a lot more about heirloom varieties. I used to be in the Midwest working with horticulture, and coming back to the home state, growing heirloom varieties, saving seed, that's all part of culture here in Appalachia. So I really, I still like some hybrid varieties, that are specific to certain types of vegetables, but there are some really good heirlooms out there that are unique to West Virginia and to Central Appalachia that we should be growing. People, if they don't know about them, should be growing, and certainly saving seed and giving the seed away to other people. But that's kind of how, I just sort of learn every year new varieties, learn from other growers, other gardeners, pass that information along to other folks, just like you do, other extension folks do. We pass information along from one grower to the next, good information. And so that's how I've really come to become knowledgeable on heirloom varieties.
Lewis, let's get back to let's go circle back to the beginning. What's the main difference between heirlooms and our hybrid varieties?
Yeah, so a hybrid variety is something that's been specifically crossed. The parents are uniquely different. So it's a controlled crossbreeding progeny from that, or offspring from that, and so you're trying to get the best traits from both parents. But those traits, if you save seed from hybrids, they don't save those same characteristics to the next generation. So with heirloom varieties, they're open pollinated, so they receive pollen from different sources, and even they're self-pollinated. And so the traits that they have, like size and shape and color, those stay consistent from one generation to the other. But if you have a hybrid variety, you have to do a specific cross in order to produce it. And then if you want to produce more hybrid seed, you have to have those same two parents. But with heirloom seeds, you can just keep saving seed from that same plant, and it breeds true. So, but the other thing is that sort of defines heirlooms is just age. I'm not really sure where you can really draw the line, but generally varieties that were planted maybe before 1945 are mostly heirloom varieties. They really started hybridizing plants in the mid 40s, right after the Second World War. So most of the varieties were open pollinated before that. So those, what is that, 70 years now, 70 years old varieties. Some of these varieties go back hundreds of years. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, so and so that's what's really cool about them, is that they're varieties that breed true. But hybrids, you know, like I said, you're getting the best of both parents. It may be disease resistance, it may be shape, size, shelf life, all that. So there are some good hybrids, but there are some really good heirlooms too. So.
Yeah, I mean, not to play devil's advocate here or anything, but I'll hit you with a couple tough questions. You know, we always kind of have two camps. We've got one side that's saying, well, you know, there's a reason some of these heirlooms they don't plant them anymore. They're not resistant to there are certain diseases that wipe them out. They don't ship well. You know, I mean, they have to as far as maturity, you know, as far as being able to pick those and ship them compared to having to eat them right off the vine or pretty quickly. And then you've got your other camp that's saying, you know, there's a reason why we have our hybrid varieties. You know, they're more disease resistant, they're drought resistant, they're they're more suited to our, you know, new as far as harvesting and things. So what's your take on that?
It's a trade-off. You know, it depends on what your customer wants. I mean, most folks, you know, want a good tasting fruit or vegetable, and you know, you just work backwards from there. I mean, these heirloom varieties have flavor. I mean, they really have a flavor. Okay, they may not have the shelf life, but that doesn't really matter if you're selling, you know, at a farmer's market or selling on your farm or a roadside stand or whatever. I mean, here in West Virginia, I mean, you know, people want to buy their food local, and I think that's across the country too. So these heirlooms have a place for local produce sales. We're not trying to ship tomatoes, you know, halfway across the country to the other side of the country. There are folks that do that, and they do a good job at doing that. And there's a market for that. There's people that want cheap food. They want maybe they'll compromise, you know, flavor and maybe nutrition for you know cheapness. That's okay. There's people like that, but there's a lot of people that want healthy food, you know, food that tastes good, and that's where these heirlooms come in at. But the other thing too, JJ, is that you know it's kind of a misperception that these heirlooms, you know, are weak, that they're you know they're soft, they're disease, you know, they get diseases bad. But you know, the ones here in Appalachia that have been selected by families for generations, they're adapted to our climate. You know, as such, you know, our climate changes a lot, but our weather changes a lot. But a lot of these varieties that we've been selecting seed from, these have been selected just in West Virginia for many generations. So they're sort of you know adapted to this. If you get an heirloom variety that may be grown in Oregon or California and try to grow it in Appalachia, it may fall apart. It probably will. But what I recommend is grow varieties that are you know regional heirlooms, not these commercial heirlooms that you see in every seed company. Varieties that tend to have flavor and just have characteristics that are unique to, in our case, West Virginia.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as I always say on the program, you have to give a lawyer type answer. Well, it depends. If you're it depends on who your customer is and what market you're growing for. We have a question from the audience, Lewis.
Yeah.
Um, she's asking about heirloom varieties. A friend's cousin developed a variety of pole beans in the 1930s or 40s called Clovis in the Mercer County area, and she's going to grow those this year for the first time. Would these be of interest to those studying heirloom varieties? And would this be considered a heirloom?
Yeah, I'm really, you know, uh, beans are one of my area that I really like to specialize in for heirlooms. And there's so many bean varieties out there, heirloom bean varieties, and some of them, you know, are just named by families or by regions of the state where they've been selected. So I'm not familiar with this variety. We've grown some pretty nice heirloom pole beans in our trials, and we like the pole beans. So I'd be happy to swap seed with her some of the varieties we've been growing, some of the heirloom varieties. Some of them are cornfield beans. Some of them are, one I'll show a picture of later is the Coal Camp bean, which comes out of Fayette County and Nicholas County, West Virginia. So that's the really cool thing here is we can exchange seed with folks and I can try their seed and they can try the varieties that I've grown or collected from other growers. But yeah, pole beans are great. Pole beans are great. I'd be happy to try that, and she can contact me. You can give her my address, and I almost send out seed every week to somebody. I get random emails from people wanting a seed, and I just mail it out to them. But yeah, very interested in it. So and also what it looks like, what the seed looks like, or what the plant looks like, and all that.
Are you doing any work with the half runners or mainly just pole beans?
Both. You know, this is a half. You know, Central Appalachia, Kentucky, West Virginia is a half runner states. I mean, this is the people, the old timers in the state. That's their go-to bean is the half runner. And I grew up raising them in our garden and in our farm, and so they have the flavor. You know, that's the reason why we still like half runners is they have the flavor. There's no comparison between a Blue Lake or you know, one of those bush bean varieties that they grow everywhere with a half runner. So we're doing half runners. We've got some new varieties of half new in the sense that they're kind of just been saved by seed savers and been released for us to grow. But yeah, the half runner is popular in West Virginia, and we want to keep it alive and keep have seed available for people to grow it so it doesn't get tough and you know, difficult to grow in hot weather. So.
Brandy, do you have any questions for Lewis?
Well, I just was thinking on the heirlooms versus the hybrid discussion that he had just a moment ago, and just really it's about what you as a grower are interested in. And I think the heirlooms, what Lewis hit it right on the head, is the flavor and just the variety that you can get. You might not get the most production out of some of those heirlooms as you would the hybrid, but I don't think that's the reason that most people grow heirlooms. It's more the flavor and the uniqueness of it, and the family traditions that Lewis was talking about. So I'm very interested in this, and I get a lot of people coming up to me sharing seeds, and it's just really a part of our Appalachian heritage. I think that people want you to try their family bean seed or tomato that they, you know, have been working on for years. So it's it kind of adds to the enjoyment of gardening, just learning about new tomatoes. We were actually down at the county agents meeting, trying to think of the guy's farm there in Upshur County. He's a conservation supervisor. Oh, I can picture his face right now, but he had a white tomato, which was really interesting that we'd never really heard of. And actually, I think down in Buchanan, Donnie, yeah, that's his Donnie Tenney, and he was actually growing some heritage plants for a special gardening project that they were having in the city of Buchanan, I guess close to the farmers market there. So it's really interesting to hear what he had going on.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, got to have that flavor. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why a lot of our gardeners stick with some of these heirlooms. I know that there are a few. Lewis, maybe you could hit. We'll start a little bit talking about heirloom tomatoes, and then we'll flip back over to the pole beans, because I know that you're doing a lot of research projects. Aren't there a few of the heirloom tomatoes though that tend to crack, and there's a few other that maybe wouldn't you discourage people on growing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are some that are really they're thin skinned, so they're having a thin skin on a tomato means it's going to be a soft tomato, and they're juicy, you know. So there you go, you got flavor, but then that doesn't really translate to being a firm tomato sometimes. So, I mean, you know, there's ways around that. I mean, we've been growing a lot of them in high tunnels where we can control the rain and the water. So you don't get as much cracking, splitting, you know, the splitting and cracking on tomatoes. They're two different things. But you don't get certainly the cracking you see with high tunnel heirloom tomatoes that you do out in the open field. But even if you're growing them in your garden, you know, it's good to mulch them pretty heavy. And if you can put a drip tube on them or a soaker hose or something where you can control the watering. The reason why a lot of these heirlooms just, you know, they melt, or they just crack, and then they just start, you know, melting, is that they get up and down water. You know, the water goes, it's dry, it's wet, it's dry, it's wet. You just got to have on tomatoes, you've got to have even watering. I water them every day. So, but I mean, we've found a place for these heirloom varieties in all these tunnels we have around West Virginia. And, you know, their yields have been pretty good. I mean, we've been getting like 20 pounds of tomatoes markable tomatoes per plant, which rivals many of these heirloom or these hybrid varieties that you grow in there. But I just want to just add on to what Brandy was saying earlier. You know, these heirloom varieties are part of people's family. I mean, it's part of their history. So when people exchange seed or give you plants from heirloom varieties, they're giving you a part of their life, and that's what's really cool about it. And it's more than just, you know, okay, I'm giving you X amount of tomato plants. This is a tomato plant that my father saved, my grandpa. You know, there's
Right.
a connection to it. I think that's what's really cool about all this is that Appalachia, you know, people matter, families matter, place matters. You know, location. People love their counties, they love their farms, they love they just love where they're growing at. But you know, if you get into some of these, you know, what we call urban markets here in West Virginia, maybe around Charleston, Huntington, here I'm in Morgantown, you can get a premium price for heirloom varieties. You know, you know, just an average person that, you know, doesn't really even garden, they say, hey, this is an heirloom variety, I'd be willing to pay a higher price for it. So you may not get as much yield, but you're still getting a higher average price on some of these varieties when you take them into some of these bigger cities in West Virginia. So that's where I think there's some potential. And then, you know, we have farmers in the state that just go out of the state a little bit, maybe to Northern Virginia. They go into, you know, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, or they may go in your area, JJ, maybe over into Ohio and maybe some of the higher population areas and sell their tomatoes, their own tomatoes there. So there are other markets outside of West Virginia that we can sell these heirloom varieties. But flavor is everything. Flavor and taste is everything. So,
Yeah, let's. I know that you're also doing some research with the mortgage lifter with
yeah,
old Radiator Charlie and the. Of course, I'm a big history buff. I know that I think over in I can't remember what county that he was from, but
Logan.
Logan County.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great story, and share with us some of the research you're doing with these mortgage lifters.
Yeah, I got to tell you, there are two strains of West Virginia mortgage lifters. So they're not all Radiator Charlie, although he's got most of the history is from that story. But there's another strain of mortgage lifter from Putnam County. And that's from the Essler family down there in Putnam County. And I have seed that's been selected from that, and it's a pink skinned mortgage lifter. The Radiator Charlie one is more reddish, more cherry red. I think it kind of deviates between pink and red, but it's mostly red. So we have that one too. But there are two strains here, and actually the one in Putnam County goes back into the 1920s. The Radiator Charlie one is the 1930s, early 1940s when he did his selections for his. But both of those mortgage lifters are identified with West Virginia. If you go to some of these other seed companies, you may get a mortgage lifter, but it may not be from that strain. It may be just something that was collected from some other part of the country that they called a mortgage lifter because it's a big beefsteak tomato. So what we're trying to do is go back to these original strains from West Virginia and select them, you know, save seed from them, and then we're going to give the seed to a seed company here in West Virginia that wants to grow them and start selling seed for folks in West Virginia. So that's the trouble you get into. I mean, it's kind of like the Brandywine tomato. You're not really sure what that is. I mean, there's so many Brandywine tomatoes, and they're not all the same. So really, we want something that's identified with West Virginia that has the traits of what originally was selected. So that's the Radiator Charlie one, which we have, which we call Brandy. I mean, we call it the Jackson County mortgage lifter from Rod White there in your county, actually Roane County. He's on the Roane-Jackson line, and Rod and his father have been saving and selecting that variety and the hillbilly hillbilly tomato, which is from West Virginia too, and he has a strain of it that I like. But then the other one I got from Greenbrier County, and that comes from the Essler family originally, so it's a pink skin one. So we do have seed from both of those two types. That I was giving seed away to folks earlier this spring, and I gave some plants away, and we'll have a lot more seed this fall if anybody needs seed. But boy, they are good tasting tomatoes. Let me tell you, they taste good. They don't have the white core. They don't have the yellow shoulder. They don't split. They have a little bit of blight tolerance. I mean, even when we grow them outside, they don't get early blight as bad as even these hybrids we've grown. But they're a 1 pounder tomato. So they're not, you know, they're not a two-handed tomato. They're something you can put in one hand. That's what sells. You know, people buy tomatoes. They don't want anything that's 3 pounds. They want something that's going to be around 10 ounces on the low end to maybe 20 ounces on the high end. That's what's going to sell. So most of those mortgage lifters are in that range.
All right, something that we can make a nice tomato sandwich or a BLT, right?
That's what I'm thinking.
Nice slicer.
Yeah, a nice slicer, something that just
Nice
fits
slicer.
on a slice of bread, and that you don't have to. I mean, nobody's going to pay $20 for a 3 pound tomato. You got to sell something. Sell a 3 pound or a 1 pound tomato for $3 or $4, and that's more reasonable for folks. But yeah, so we've been happy. We've been, I've got 2 tunnels filled with tomatoes, both strains, and they're isolated because we're going to save seed from them. But we've been pretty happy with how they've been producing. And so if everybody's tired of growing, celebrities and, big beefs and better boys and all these standard varieties, maybe it's time to look back to some of our heirloom varieties. They're indeterminate, so they're not going to be a bush type tomato, but they're going to produce all summer, and they're going to produce 20-25 pounds per plant, which is pretty cool.
Cool. I got a couple questions from the audience. Can you go over the basics for seed saving for beginners?
Yeah, I mean, so I tell you, I mean, for saving seed on beans, it's real easy because I mean they only need to be isolated by about 15 feet between varieties because they self-pollinate. So if you really want to start with something like a vegetable crop, beans would be the easiest crop to work with because they breed true because they're highly self-fertile. And I mean, tomatoes, we save a lot of seed on them. I think you'd want to isolate tomatoes about 25, they say 50 feet, but at least 25 feet apart. I know people have small gardens sometimes, but if you're going to save varieties seed, you got to make sure you have purity on the varieties, so they can cross-pollinate with tomatoes. Bees will cross-pollinate tomato flowers, so that'll happen. But if you can, if somehow you can isolate them either by planting day or by distance, you might have something to breed true on that. I just select on the beans. Basically, when I save seed on beans, it's just beans that I'm not picking anymore. So we pick all of our beans for yield, and we've been freezing them and processing them. So we pick all those, and then probably the last harvest or second harvest, I just let those beans dry down, and those are ones we save seed from. So you don't have to just have one plant that's just devoted to seed production on beans. You can have both. On tomatoes, we just select from the healthiest plants. We want the plant to be disease-free. We want to take probably the best fruit from that plant that's vine ripened. We want it to be fully ripened, and then we just squeeze the pulp into a jar, and then I ferment it there for about 7 days. Some people add water to the pulp. I don't. I just squeeze the juice and the seeds from the tomato, the ripe tomato, into a jar, and then let it sit, and then it starts fermenting, and then it gets mold on the top of the pulp, and you just scrape that off, and then in about 7 days, all the good seeds have sunk to the bottom of the jar, and all you have to do is have a colander or a strainer or something, and just put them in that strainer and wash those seeds, and then blot them dry on a paper towel and let them air dry for about a week or two, and then put them into storage in a refrigerator or freezer, and they do really well. I don't know, I don't know how many thousands of seeds we saved on tomatoes last year, and we had 90% germination on all the seeds, so we did a pretty good job on saving it. So
That's good. If you don't save seeds for heirlooms, we had another question. What are the best seed sources for heirlooms where you get some?
yeah, I mean, so you go to some of these seed companies, and almost all these seed companies now have heirloom varieties. But like I said, you just don't know, because we did a trial, I think it was 2 years ago, where we bought mortgage lifter from like 15 different seed companies, and I mean, it was across the board. These tomatoes did not look alike. I don't know where they came from, but it's amazing that some of these mortgage lifters were very different from others. But you know, so what we've been doing is, you know, going to places like Sustainable Mountain Agriculture Center, which is down in, it actually used to be in Berea, Kentucky, but now it's moved down to just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. So it's a family-owned seed company, and they are a great Appalachian heirloom seed company. So that's what you kind of want to target, seed companies that are in Appalachia, you know, that have our varieties, rather than buy from like Burpees or someplace like that, where you're not really sure where the seed's coming from.
What was the name of that again?
So it was Sustainable Mountain Agriculture Center, SMAC. You just put Sustainable Mountain and Google it, it'll bring up their webpage. But they're really good for the heirloom, certainly the heirloom beans and the heirloom tomatoes. They do sell some squash too, some heirloom squash, but mostly they're heirloom tomatoes. So their owner, Bill Best, wrote this book on Kentucky heirloom seeds. The next thing we need to do is write a West Virginia heirloom.
That's why I was going to just ask Lewis, when is your book coming out?
That's what I'd like to do. I mean, I would have to have input from other folks, but I want to sort of document some of these varieties too that are unique to West Virginia. And that's probably the next thing we'll do. But Bill is, you know, in his late 80s now, and his son has taken over. Excuse me, his son has taken over, and they're keeping the business alive and open. And they collect seed from seed savers throughout Appalachia, and then they grow it there on their farm, and then they collect the seed or harvest the seed there. The other place is the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange in Louisiana, Virginia. Yeah, which Ira Wallace has been over to the Small Farm Conference in West Virginia several times, and we always like having Ira over from the Southern Exposure Seed Company. They have some great heirloom varieties from Appalachia, and so in fact, that's the place where you can get the West Virginia 63 tomatoes, and the newest, the Mountaineer Delight and the Mountaineer Pride varieties that Dr. Gallagher's been working with and working to improve. But they also have many heirloom varieties, and then I guess the third seed company I would recommend would be down in outside of Asheville, North Carolina, you know, which is Southern Appalachia, which is So True Seed, SOW, So True Seed, and they have a lot of heirloom varieties that are unique to Appalachia too. So that would be the places I would go to first. And, you know, Baker Creek Heirloom out in the Midwest. When I used to be in Missouri, I used to work with the Gettles and with that company. But they are sort of more of a, you know, heirloom varieties throughout the world. I mean, you may see heirloom varieties, you know, from Asia in their seed portfolios. But here, you know, you go to some of those companies I mentioned; those are Appalachian seed companies. And let's say one more thing: is a seed company that we're going to be, you know, giving the seed to in addition here in West Virginia, which is the Two Seeds in a Pod, which is just starting outside of Morgantown, and he is starting his seed company. It's up and going this year, but it'll take a few years for him to get the heirloom Appalachian varieties available for sale. So.
And Southern Exposure, don't they normally provide a vendor booth at their West Virginia Small Farm Conference? So that would be a great place to come and talk with the sales rep in person and see the varieties that they have. We have that annually, and when is it, Lewis? Usually February, March, part of the year. It varies.
Mid-February, yeah, usually mid-February. I think it's on schedule to be for February 2022. So yeah, I mean, we always have discussions on heirloom varieties at the Small Farms Conference, Brandy, as you know, and we do like to invite the folks from some of these seed companies to come in and talk about their varieties and give seed packets away. And we've done seed swaps there at the conference too. So, you know, this is the other thing, you know, if you have seed that you want to exchange and get some seed in return, you can come to that conference. There's some other places that do seed swaps in Appalachia that I can point you to, and there's seed libraries around the state that you can exchange seed at these seed libraries too. So yeah, just want to do more of that. Get people, you know, eating and sharing what they grow.
Cool. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
So, Lewis, seeing your poster behind you, I see there's a bunch of squashes or pumpkins or gourds. Do you have any recommendations for later season heirloom varieties besides tomatoes?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question, Evan. So, you know, like I said, we're an extension, so we tell the truth. I mean, we tell, you know, if it's not good, we say, you know, it's not good. If it's good, it's good. I mean, that's just the way it is. But there, you know, there are some heirloom varieties of squash that are really good. There's some that are not so great. I mean, and some of the hybrid varieties of squash, some on the poster behind me, are incredible, just for, you know, pies and all that. But there's still some really good winter squashes that are heirlooms. And I just ordered yesterday the Candy Roaster squash, which is what we're putting in our Three Sisters garden here for the students, to be a demo for the people doing the Three Sisters Grow This program this year. And it's, you know, it's a really nice winter squash. It can get, you know, 10, 15 pounds, great for making pies. You can eat the seeds, you can roast the seeds. And also it's a good keeper. It stores really well. So, you know, Candy Roaster is really good. And then I like these neck pumpkins, these Cushaw squashes, which are mostly green striped. There's some that are yellow striped, but most of them are green striped. And they're excellent for pies, and they yield really well, and they store well. So, yeah, I mean, you know, then you kind of move into the area where, you know, are there any good heirloom acorn squashes? No, there really aren't. I mean, are there any good heirloom spaghetti squashes? No, but there are good Hubbard squashes, and, you know, in that area, there's a Waltham butternut squash is an old time variety. It's still good. So I mean, if you want to grow a butternut squash that you can save seed from, the Waltham butternut squash is one that you can do that. But, you know, if you thumb through the seed catalogs, like if you get a Johnny's Selected Seed catalog, they have so many winter squashes now, and some of them are just miniature size, you know, little single serving squashes. And, you know, your heirloom varieties are not that size. They're big. they're going to be big. So, you know, if people want small serving sizes of squash, they're probably going to go with a hybrid. But they want a big storage, you know, winter storage squash. Some of those heirloom varieties are still pretty good for that. So.
Lewis, we've always had luck with the Long Island cheese.
Oh yeah.
Even to the point that we had way more than we could sell.
You give them away, huh? Yeah.
I enjoy them though. They supposedly make good pie filling, things like that. They're very productive.
Yeah, and they're ornamental too, so they look really nice to just have for display. So yeah, I think that's a good idea too. You know, on the pumpkin side, I mean, you know better than I do, JJ. You know, professional pumpkin grower that you are. I mean, those old varieties of pumpkins like Connecticut Field, they just don't have powdery mildew resistance or tolerance, and they just don't have the size that the hybrids have. So, you know, you kind of have to be selective on some of these things. If you really want to be pure about it and grow an heirloom, that's great. But if you're trying to, you know, grow pumpkins and have pumpkins for sale, the hybrids are hard to beat. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that especially with the powdery mildew resistant technology, we plant mostly those, but then we do have an acre or two that we set aside. We plant the Cinderellas, the Long Island cheese, the Cushaws, I should say we have we have pie pumpkins, and then our big pumpkins, our jack-o'-lantern or carvers, those are more decorative. So we may try to mix some of those in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like I said, there's still a place for some of these old time varieties when the squashes and the pumpkins. Yeah, if somebody wants something just to eat, you know, there's some of these heirloom varieties are really good, are good pie pumpkins and squashes for making pies.
And let's not forget that the schools are even incorporating them, some of like the orange squashes into like spaghetti sauces and
Oh, right.
pureeing them, then mixing them in to add more vegetables into the school
nice.
system's recipes. So there's a commercial side of that too. If you can get one of those varieties that work well.
Yeah, so that is where they've been freezing the butternut squash, right? It's been, yeah. So there is a wholesale market for that. I think that's interesting. I think a lot of those are still Waltham butternut squash.
Yeah, that's what it's the standard that we have been growing for a very long time. So and works well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Louis, maybe we'll flip back to I want you to tell us a little bit more about your research with the pole beans and half runners. I just like it because they have such cool names. You've got Volunteer, Josephine Jackson, Turkey Crawl, Fat Man, October.
These are not politically correct names. There's Fat Man. There's a variety called Lazy Wife. You know, they're just like they'll just throw any name out there. You know, you know, that's a nice thing. You can name anything you want. I mean, nobody's going to say you can't name it that. And so it gets these names and they stick with them, and that's what's really nice.
Tell us about the trellising you set up and how far you plan them, all the over the management for them.
All right. Well, I just have a few pictures that maybe
we
can go through kind of quick here before we end up ending today. Yeah, I mean, with the Appalachian beans, I just wanted to show, this was the coal camp. I think I'll show a picture of it a little bit later on too, but that comes from Betty Flanagan in Nicholas County, West Virginia. And that's the only place I know where to get this variety. And Betty has been saving this seed for many, many years and tells me that there's a story that, you know, it did come from Kentucky, showed up in the coal camps through the New River Gorge or New River area through there and the logging camps. And so it just got its name, coal camp. And it's a really good pole bean. You know, it's tender. You can cook it like a green bean, just like you would a regular, you know, bush bean, a jade or a striped bush bean. You can cook it the same way as you do that. It's got one string. So one string means, you know, you got a string and snap, which is not the end of the world. But then you can also let it dry down and harvest it as a soup bean or as a dry bean. So it really makes a nice dry bean too. So it's got lots of uses, either as a fresh green bean or as a dry bean. And I will give seed away for this because we got a lot of seed in storage, and we haven't planted ours yet, which we'll do. It makes a good cornfield bean, grows up a corn stalk and does really well there. So yeah, so we're saving seed. That's just kind of getting back to that question. You know, you want the pods to be really very dry, and you know, we have a sheller, mechanical sheller, but we want to make sure that the beans are really dry when we're shelling them. The picture up on the corner there, those bottlenecked squashes, those are the Cushaw squashes. That's what a Cushaw looks like, as you may know if you've grown them before. So we have some folks growing them, and they're an old-time Appalachian variety, and we like them a lot. You see on the left-hand side of the screen, that's me holding another West Virginia variety, which is the Kellogg's Breakfast Yellow Beefsteak Tomato. That comes from West Virginia, and it's a great yellow tomato, orange yellow kind of. So if you can get some of the Kellogg's Breakfast Yellow Tomato, I think you'll really like it because it's low acid. It's really sugar. It's kind of a sweet tomato. It's low acid, and it's really, really good for that. I don't really have time to talk about it, but we're also looking at multiplier onions, which are West Virginia type onions. You can see down in the corner on the left-hand corner, those clumped onions. So we're looking at different strains multiplier onions that one of our seed savers has been selecting. So we think that's something that can sell really well because they're really good storage onions too. But that is what the candy roaster squash looks like, and that's what would be harvested when it's ripened and put into storage. And that, so we're going to mix it with corn and our beans. So we're going to create the Three Sisters garden. That's what the red mortgage lifter looks like. And you can see it has a classic beefsteak look to it. And you don't see any cracking, splitting, yellowing. If you cut into it, it would be consistently red. So you don't want any white streaks in it, and you don't have any of that. So we've been selecting seed from this strain, and we really think it has a lot of potential here for the state. So you want to read more about Kentucky Heirlooms, that book I was just holding up by Bill Best and Dottie Adams. There's Dottie's passed away, but Bill is still fortunately out and active and still working. And so this is a great book. It just was printed 3 years ago. So it talks about all these varieties of beans and squash and tomatoes and corn that we grow here in Appalachia. So great thing to have. So we've been looking at growing these Appalachian green beans. It's just funded from the SARE project. And we think this can have commercial potential here in West Virginia because we have a lot of people that eat beans. It's a staple vegetable. And there's also people that haven't been traditional bean eaters that still want to buy fresh green beans. And so we think there's a good market for these heirloom varieties. And these are some of the half runners we've been looking at that have different levels of yield. I don't have time to talk about all of them, but I have a couple pictures of some of them, and I'll talk about that.
Louis, in our area, most people stick with the Mountaineer half runner. Is that pretty much I mean, they're great producers. Is that?
Yeah, Mountaineer's a really good variety. I mean, it's way better than the state half runner, which is pretty terrible. But the Mountaineer half runner is one of our top tier yielders. I mean, it's done really well for us. I don't know if it's always the same, but we get our seed from the same place on the Mountaineer. I don't know if I don't get it from southern states, but I've had people say that they've had some Mountaineer half runners from southern state seed and it wasn't good, but I don't know any more about it than that. But we've had good success with it. And it's been it's a good white seeded half runner, a 6-inch pod, yields really well, has good flavor, cans well, we freeze it, been freezing well. So these pole beans, yeah, we've looked at different ones. I did throw an F1 hybrid in there, that Vortex, which we look at every year, but it's a stringless pole bean. So we kind of compare everything to it. But the Coal Camp has been one of our top pole beans. The Fat Man and the Fat Horse, which I don't have listed here, are also from West Virginia, and they also are really good pole beans for West Virginia. I want to talk about those, but we've also been doing the horticultural beans, the shell beans, the bird egg beans. There's a market for them in the state. It's tricky because you have to shell them fresh, which is not easy to do, but they're also a good dry bean too. So we've been shelling them as dry beans. But just a little bit on our field trials. And I look at this and I say, oh gosh, another year of this work. I can't believe we'll have to do this again. I mean, it's like, after a while, picking beans becomes sort of really a bad job. It never ends. Picking 3 times a week for 12 weeks, it never stops. But we do have some students at the farm that help on the project. And so we've been looking at different styles of trellising because, the only thing we know about these beans is they yield really well, but they're hard to pick. They're not going to be machine picked. There's never going to be a robot that's going to pick them. So what can we do to make it easier for farmers and gardeners to pick these things? And the only way to really do that was to just kind of angle the trellises over so that the pods hang out from the trellis, that we can just come down the row and just pick the pods faster, which really has worked. So we've angled these things, these panels, which we can make a panel in 5 minutes, one of these 8x8 panels that you see here. And then they're just angled with T-posts. We got a little protractor, digital protractor. We can set the angle. to save everybody just a lot of work, we figured the 35-degree angle is the best angle to get the pods to separate from the vines. So that's really been the best way to do that. So, you know, we use these wood frames, treated, untreated wood. We've done both. There really is no cheaper way to make them than by wood. But then we just put them down the row. We do a double row. It's on plastic, you know, mulch, as you can see, and the rows are on 10-foot centers. So, you know, it's like having one row every 5 feet, which isn't too bad. But we're really getting a higher yield with these vertical, what we call cross-arm trellises, because we're able to pick them faster, and actually it opens the canopy up to more sunlight, so that the plant yields more. So we've been happy with that. So the other way, you know, traditional way that you grow pole beans and half-runner beans is you put them on something they grow up and down, either a corn stalk or a trellis, a wooden, you know, post, or what we have here, which is just T-posts with netting on it. So you just have to have some way that they grow up and down, maybe 8 feet. Well, they're hard to pick. I mean, they get matted. You know, there's just no easy way to pick them when they're growing that, and they stay wet the pods stay wet after rain or after heavy dew. But when you have the canopy separated like we do, as I said, the pods are easier to find for the pickers, but they actually they don't stay wet. You know, they dry out after you get a rain or a heavy dew in the morning, so they're easy to start picking. And so
Louis, that nylon netting, where do you say that's 8 foot tall to roll?
Yeah, it's 8 foot. That's as tall as I can reach.
Where do you get that at?
Well, you know, what we use is what they call that Hortinova trellis, which used to be expensive, but it's not so bad anymore. I mean, you can get it from Johnny Seed. You can go online. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Gardener's Supply. And so we would like to get more than 1 year of life out of it. We've only been getting 1 year because it's just hard to separate the vines from it. So we just put on new netting every year. But we have some I should be careful saying that. We have some shorter students at the farm. But I say, I'm not saying this the wrong way or anything, but I mean, a lot of our farmers, you know, are women. They're maybe a little shorter than some of the taller guys that pick. So this is really well suited for them because they're able to reach the pods and pick it pretty clean. But if you're going, you know, putting on a big old tall trellis, it's hard to reach those pods up a little bit higher up. And so some of our student workers really appreciated this. And let me tell you, they needed all the support they could to pick these beans.
Real quick, Louis, how far apart do you plant those, and what kind of fertility program do you have for them?
Well, you know, beans don't need a lot of fertilizer. I mean, they don't take a lot of nitrogen at all. I mean, they actually will fix some nitrogen. So, I mean, I honestly, you know, there are some herbicides you can use on beans, but we like to put them on plastic mulch, and then we seed them on the plastic. As I said, the drip tape, I just like that system because it keeps the weeds under control. So the fertilizer we put, I mean, you could put, you know, triple 19, but don't go over more than 70 pounds of nitrogen per acre rate with it. And, you know, they're really, like I said, low input on the fertilizer end. And they're easy to grow organically, which is really cool because they don't have a lot of pest problems relative to other crops. So we were able to grow them organically pretty well without any sprays and anything like that. But we grow white clover in between the beds, and that fixes nitrogen. And so when we rotate, what we do is we move the beds over to where the clover was the previous year. So we don't have a lot of land to rotate to at this farm we're working at, so we just move the rows. And so we're getting some nitrogen from that cover crop that we planted in between the beds. So you can see that, you know, the pods have been hanging out there pretty nice and pretty easy for those students to come there. And I picked a lot too. I mean,
so this is up at the university. Are they going to be offering any farm tours this summer or later in the fall, Louis?
Yeah, you know, they couldn't figure out how to record a Zoom call, so they didn't do that. They didn't do anything virtual last year. So there will be an in-person field day in
August. Is that
late
right?
August, early September.
That is very good because I have master gardeners that was hoping to come up last year and then COVID hit. So my
Yeah.
local master gardeners was really wanting. Is that on the organic farm or just all
Yeah,
the?
that's, you know, what we call the horticulture farm, but it's the organic farm. But you know, that's other thing, Brandy, is I think this is the last year I'm going to do any field work with these trellises, this scale, and I'm going to give the trellises away to people. We have about 100 of them. Can you believe? I mean, there's just a lot. We put up 88 last year, and that took a long time. But
Should I tell my master gardeners to drive their trucks even though we're trying to carpool in a van? I'm just,
Yeah,
yeah,
we get some free trellises.
that's the thing. I mean, you know, they are, although they are 8x8 panels, they can be taken apart, you know,
Yeah.
and people can re-screw them back together. We didn't really design them to be done like that. I'm happy to do that, and we have at least one grower in the state who's using these panels inside a high tunnel. So all their beans in their high tunnel, they're losing a row because of the slant, you know, so they're not getting as many plants, but it's so much easier to pick and faster to pick that they're willing to go with the slanted trellis inside a high tunnel rather than these tall vertical ones that I'm showing a picture of here. So they can be used in a high tunnel too. We have a little video on how to build the trellises, so people can figure that out if they want to build them themselves. But we'll probably give the trellises away to folks. There's a volunteer. That's the Josephine Jackson. I know we're running out of time, but Jackson's been one of our favorite half runners, and that comes from Eastern Kentucky. And it's tender, and you know, has a string, but not a bad string on it, and just one of our top yielders. We've done some brown seeded half runners, which are okay. That's Cold Camp. So Cold Camp, like I said, just going to go back to it. That's what it looks like, but it has kind of a purplish. Some of the pods are purple, which is really nice, and so you have that kind of purplish tint to it. And so that's it. And so yeah, I'm happy to give seed away to anybody that wants seed this year for anything. I mean, so we're mostly saving seed from the tomatoes and the beans, but I do have some squash, some candy roaster squash that we'll be saving seed from too. So.
All right, Lewis, I need to ask you a couple music questions here. You know that there's two types of music, country and western swing. Who's your favorite artist and what is your favorite song?
Well, I like, I think on the countryside, I like George Strait, you know.
There you go.
Yeah, because I don't like this new country music. I think it's not country music at all. You know, I kind of like more. So I think George Strait and, you know, that kind of style country music is kind of the old time country stuff. So yeah, I like almost anything that he sings, and that's kind of my favorite on that. This new stuff is kind of like more like pop music. sounds like rock music to me. So yeah.
Okay. I have, before we go, I have another question with, maybe you could talk real quick. I thought it was pretty cool how you were having the students, the way they were picking those and freezing it so you could sell it at the farmer's market. Could you go over that in a couple minutes?
Yeah. So we haven't frozen as much as I wanted to. We wanted to freeze 1,000 pounds last year. We ended up only freezing like 200 pounds. So we've got some places in the state that do the freezing. The only big problem has been the stringing. You know, it's taken some time to hand string these, but you know, we've done the economics on it, and even with the labor involved in the stringing and the tipping, it's still profitable enough to sell them because you can get $4 to $6 a pound for frozen beans. So you know, selling them during the winter, there's still a profit margin with that. So we're going to freeze some more this year. So we work with the Preston Shelter Workshop in Reedsville, but we also have a farm in Brewston Mills that she does freezing. She has a certified kitchen on her farm. She does some freezing, and then some of you folks know the Sickler Farms up in Moatsville. outside of Philippi. They just opened a new store on their farm, and they have a kitchen on their farm store, and they're going to be freezing beans too. So we test marketed frozen beans this year, and they sold out. I mean, the people
Really?
love them. We put the West Virginia grown label on it. We put the Appalachian heritage beans. You know, I have this publication on growing these heirloom beans, and we gave that to people that they could pick it up at the store when they bought the beans. And people wanted more and more. They were just kept asking, do you have any more? Do you have any more? So I think there's a market there. And, you know, I think it's another way to sort of just extend your marketing season for these beans. And what's really nice about it. I was kind of doubtful because I was more into canning beans and less in freezing, and the frozen beans tasted great. They tasted just like they were picked, you know, and so you got to blanch them and all that, and so they have to be processed right. But I was really happy with the quality. The color was good, and so I think, you know, we can test the price points a little bit more, maybe push it around. You know, certainly here in Morgantown, I think we can get $8 a pound for frozen beans, but I think there's a market potential there. And
So Lewis, was that in a flash freezer that they were using in their
Yeah.
commercial kitchens?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
that is,
I thought it would.
yeah, I mean, I think as these farmers and as these people that we've been having do this, do more of it, the labor is going to go down. I think they'll get more efficient at it. But that's the only drawback is the string, and there's no equipment or a machine that can take the string off these beans, so it has to still be done by hand. I mean, so, and that's just what it is. But there's a price for that string, flavor. You know, you get the flavor in return. So I think, you know, but some people, you know, which was really nice, you sell these beans at farmers markets, and people say, okay, good, I don't mind stringing them. You know, so there's a lot of people that don't mind stringing beans or shelling beans, you know, or shelling peas. You know, there's a market out there, but then there's people that want them ready to eat too. So there's that market too.
All right. Well, Lewis, I thank you again for
Hey,
coming
guys.
on.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
We have
Another
one more
question?
question in the chat.
Okay.
Somebody sent this to me. Are the trellis making videos available?
Yeah. We do have it. I mean, and it's not posted anywhere yet, but we do have it. They're supposed to be working on a step-by-step guide, you know, little guide sheet to do it. They haven't done that yet, but we do have a video, and it, you know, it's really simple. They just make a jig and they just sort of do these assembly line, and they made 80 of them in 5 hours. You know, so they did pretty well. So I can get people information on that if they want to know how to build it. Like I said, they might be able to salvage some of our trellises for next year if they want to get them next year. But we haven't patented any of this, and it's all free information.
Okay. Well, again, any other questions? Well, Lewis, thank you again for being on the program.
Thanks
We're
for
going to go
inviting
ahead.
me, guys. Glad to show up. Yeah, thanks for
Great.
everything.